Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is November 5th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. I know I've been away for the past few days, almost even a week, I believe, actually. But I was fighting off a little bit of an illness there. I was under the weather, and so I just had to focus on taking care of myself for the past few days. And hopefully, come tomorrow or the next day, I'm back to being 100%. So my apologies for being away, but I'm sure you can understand. So a lot has taken place over the past few days that I've been away. The stock market has rallied considerably. Global stock markets have rallied considerably, some making all-time highs, as in here in the United States, some making multi-year highs, and some that just continue to rally despite the news. Are we in a melt-up? It's a very interesting question. It's something that we have never ruled out here at the Capital News. I've been very consistent about this. It's not something that I assigned a large probability to. I always gave a larger probability to seeing a downside move of some significance. However, it appears that the new narrative being floated out there in the mainstream financial news is that it's more likely that we're going to see a melt-up, and not just your year-end Santa Claus rally, as they like to call it, but an actual melt-up, and perhaps a Santa Claus rally on top of it. So this can get rather interesting, to say the least. Now, given my track record here in looking at our volatility model, I have also always been consistent with that, stating that the volatility model does not predict or give me guidance as to where the market's going to move up or down. All it tells me is if we are headed for volatility. And with that, I've always said, again, reiterating, a melt-up is possible, but given history and given the fundamental economic news that we hear and analyze on a daily basis, globally and domestically, I said it's more likely, playing the probabilities game, that we are going to see another correction like last year. And I think if another correction of that magnitude occurs, we'll blow past it and through it, and it'll be even worse, and probably, the onset of something much more significant, which I think is necessary and would be healthy for this economy and for the system. Now, of course, politicians and central bankers don't want to take responsibility for it, so they're trying to do their very best, and my goodness, are they being quite successful at it at the time being, of kicking this can further and further down the road. So we're going to have to be very mindful, because there's a lot of investment banks out there and some prominent investors who have been more cautious, who have been even outright bearish and quite bearish, who are now saying, yeah, you know what, a melt-up is possible. And maybe that is even what they are now predicting. But always be careful by this, because the market always has a way of surprising people. So now if you get a whole bunch of bears who are now saying, well, you know, I'm throwing in the towel, you're now really lopsided. Everybody now is on one side of the boat. And if everybody's on one side of the boat, look out below, because this baby could rock over at any moment. And history is a guide with that. If you look at 1987, if you look at the Great Depression, and a whole host of other historical events in regards to the stock market. So be cautious. Stay diversified and stay vigilant, like I tell you. And that's why I tell you to stay diversified and stay vigilant, because none of us know when this day of reckoning is going to come, but it is going to come. And I'm going to have to do another presentation of capital economics that highlights this, because for the first 7 or 8 videos that I believe I have up on thecapitalnews.com and our YouTube channel, The Capital News, our presentations have highlighted more so on economic data itself, GDP, budget deficits, yield curve, this type of stuff. What I'm going to have to illustrate to you guys is an overlay of central bank money printing and stock price performance. And it's quite frightening. This is proof positive that this is a crime, that this is a fraud, that these markets are bought and paid for. Well, they're bought for by central banks, and they're going to be paid for by all of us, and what I think is going to be quite a hefty price tag. Because, yeah, you might want to applaud yourself and pat yourself on the back for being a very smart investor, for doing perhaps absolutely nothing but buying shares and equities, obviously, but just buying and holding, because Jay Powell and other central bankers are coming to the quote-unquote rescue, printing billions and billions of dollars, and so you might get an extra 10, maybe even 20% gain. But are you going to be smart enough to time when the clock has struck midnight and this thing is going to roll over? Because if you remember the dot-com crash, the NASDAQ lost 80% over the course of a year and a half, 2 years time frame. That's very quick to lose 80%. And the vast majority of that gets lost even quicker. So you're going to lose 20 to 40% before you even know what hit you. Okay? And that's what history tells us. You're going to lose that first 20 or 40% before you even know what happened. Recouping a 20 or 40% loss is not an easy task, especially in what I think is coming because of all of the debt that we are swimming around in at every level, at the household consumer level, at the corporate level, at the government level, and now at the central bank level, because they own debt outright. They own mortgage-backed securities outright. Some central banks own stocks and ETFs outright. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Federal Reserve starts to get into that as well. Now, they're not supposed to be doing that, but I wouldn't be surprised in the event of all hell breaking loose that they get involved in trying to prop up the stock market, which they're already doing, but actually doing so by purchasing shares outright, which in my opinion is a crime in and of itself, but that's what they're doing. So this is a crime. This is a fraud. This is not free market capitalism. This is a market that's, again, bought for by the central banks, but it's going to be paid for by you and me. You think wealth inequality is bad now? Wait until this puppy takes off. If, and it's a big if we do see a melt up, because if you see another 10, 20, 30% to the upside, what do you think is going to happen to wealth inequality? It's going to get even worse, and that's going to cause even greater political divisiveness globally, because we have protests that are taking place all over the world. And I said, look, this is the canary in the coal mine. This is a shot across the bow. This is not transitory. This is going to be history in the making. It is history in the making. These are the weakest pillars. These are the weakest links. Iraq, Venezuela, Lebanon, etc., 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 that are giving in to economic reality. It's only a matter of time before more developed countries around the world realize the mess that they are in as well, and everybody starts to protest. So that was just a shot across the bow. I believe central banks know this. I believe many politicians know this, but nobody wants to take responsibility for it. So instead of telling we the people the truth and saying, here's the game plan, it's how we're going to clean all of this up, we're just going to print $60 billion a month here in the United States. We're going to lower interest rates 3 times in the last 4 months, tell you everything's okay, tell you that there is no inflation, tell you that manufacturing and everything is great here in the United States and around the world, even though it's all in contraction, and just go about your merry business. Just go about your merry business. There's nothing to see here, folks. That's not what I do here with my audience at the Capital News. I try to give it to you straight. I try to give you the truth. I'm hoping that the stock market is still linked to the underlying economy, but at this juncture, it's not. It's not. And that's why I can repeat on a daily basis all of this deteriorating economic numbers in data. But there is no pullback in these stock markets. And in fact, the worse the number is, it's almost like these markets just get even stronger. Whether you're talking South Korea, Hong Kong, Japan, Germany, France, the UK, and now the United States. It makes no difference where you are. These markets are just taking off, and it has me frightened because it is completely decoupled from economic reality. And how long can we keep this game going? Because there is no price discovery. And are people going to be prepared when this thing does correct? And when I say correction, I'm talking major correction. So you have to stay diversified, and you have to stay vigilant. So a lot to keep you up to date on that. I think going forward here, because these markets are completely decoupled from economic reality, I'm still going to throw out some of our daily numbers just to say where things are, to see if our volatility model continues to hold water through year end. And if there's, of course, any major breaking news that takes place on the stock markets, I'll, of course, update the audience as to those updates. But there's really nothing to report, as far as I'm concerned. If this economy is completely decoupled, I'm just going to sound like a broken record. And I know to some of you that I may sound like a broken record, but guess what? Some of the things that I talk about, I need to repeat here on a daily basis because the audience is growing, and that's because that's what this podcast is all about, especially when it comes to the Federal Reserve. Ending the Federal Reserve, abolishing the Federal Reserve, and abolishing the federal income tax. Because you want to solve problems, those are the two things you have to get rid of. Otherwise, you're not going to solve a damn thing. Believe me when I tell you, you're not going to solve anything. You can think you're smart, you can think you're going to do something good, but you're not. It's not going to work. It'll snap back on you. You think you can cut this, you think you can cut back on that, or add a little bit to this. Bam, I got another spice in there. I think I'm going to solve it. No, you're not going to do a damn thing. Believe me when I tell you. You're going to be back here in another 4 years with another president, and another 4 years with another president, and you're going to be complaining and moaning about the same exact things. Why? Because you still have a federal income tax, and you still have a Federal Reserve that's in operation. Until and unless you get rid of those two things, it's going to continue to be Groundhog's Day. Believe me when I tell you. So I think I'm going to pull back a little bit on some of this financial mumbo jumbo, simply because it's being bought and paid for by the Federal Reserve and everybody else. And it's just a fraud. Nobody's doing anything about it because nobody cares. Because as long as your 401k is going up, you don't give a damn. And that's a true shame. If it goes down, you're going to raise all hell and fury. But if it's going up, who cares? I'm making money. You want it to go up because businesses are making money. They're out competing, they're innovating, they're doing a whole host of things that are correct for a marketplace, for a free market. That's not what we have here. And in fact, and I'm going to do this too on other presentations, if you look at corporate profits, especially as a percentage of GDP here in the United States, we're at a 4.5-year low. We have been consistently going down on a negative trajectory for the past 4.5 years. This is the longest negative trajectory, by the way, in U.S. history. Okay? Or at least I should say for the past several decades, okay? We've never gone this far having this without seeing a recession. So I'm not going to continue to bang my head off the table here, saying what should happen, what's going to happen, this, that, and the other, because the central bank is pulling the lever. Donald Trump couldn't care less. In fact, he loves it because he continues to tweet out almost on a daily basis as we continue to make new all-time highs on the Dow, on the S&P 500. He loves it. So the markets are convinced that Jay Powell, at least for the time being, has come to the rescue, and that if there is any other type of major pullback in the stock prices, he's going to come back in again with lower interest rates and a continuation of overnight lending and quantitative easing, although we're not supposed to call it quantitative easing. You also have the market continuing to believe the lies and the exaggeration from Donald Trump and his administration that we are going to sell more soybeans. They continue to buy this. For 2 years, they continued to believe that we're going to sell more soybeans. So you have that, and you have money printing, and you have Never Never Land. That's where we are. We're with Peter Pan and Tinkerbell in Never Never Land. That's the world in which you live in. But your 401k is up 10%, you're a genius. What do I know? All right, so I'm going to pull back on some of that stuff, even though we continue now. We're finally starting to see a slowdown in services. Remember, PMI services was supposed to be the saving grace. Services and the consumer were supposed to be the two last remaining pillars that were going to keep everybody alive. Well, now those things are starting to roll over, especially services PMIs. A lot of them are still in expansion, meaning they're above 50, but now they're slowing down. Japan's number, their PMI services now just hit a 3.5-year low. You even have the PMI, and this is manufacturing, PMI manufacturing for Hong Kong that came out the other night, 39. I think 39, 39.3, the lowest in history. But guess what the Hang Seng, the Hong Kong stock market, did? It rallied. So you have the worst number in history. You have a continuation of protests. You have a continuation of a global slowdown. But these stock markets don't care. So to me, it's like lying to you. If I continue to come out and say, well, look, here's bad economic data, and the stock market goes up. Now, that's the truth because that's what's taking place, but it's so decoupled, it's so perverse, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to you. So I'm going to continue to update you, but to a lesser degree. Because the other thing that I want to talk about here is the impeachment inquiry, which has been heating up because you have a continuation of some witnesses going before the select House committees who are conducting this impeachment inquiry behind closed doors. We are now starting to see a release of these transcripts, which I stated better happen, and now we are starting to see that. There were 2 transcripts that were released yesterday. There were 2 more transcripts that were released today. We have Ambassadors Yovanovitch, Sondland, Volker, and an advisor, McKinley of the State Department. Those 4 have thus far been released. I know to be consistent with what we've done here at the Kapital News would be to read a lot of these transcripts. Of course, there were other witnesses who have testified, and I imagine those transcripts will also be released. I will do my best to make our way through them. However, I'm not going to read all of them because we simply cannot. These depositions were hours long, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours long, some of them. These are hundreds of pages. I simply don't have enough time in the format that I do here, that I operate in on the Kapital News, to make our way through all of them. And to be perfectly honest with you, you probably don't want to hear me talking for that long to begin with. So I'm going to make my way through some of them tonight. I'm going to focus on Ambassador or Special Envoy Volker's opening statement. Okay, this transcript is 360 pages in and of itself. Okay, just his. All right. But before I get to that, I just want to again set the stage with what's been going on with this impeachment inquiry. Some other breaking news that has come out given these transcripts being released over the past couple of days. And what I think we're likely going to see, so that we're going to have our hands full with this, so I'm going to focus most of my attention on some of this stuff. And if I come across some interesting things in making my way through these transcripts, I'm of course going to share that information with you as well. And you can find this easily just by doing a Google search of the individual's name, transcript. It should come right up. Click on a PDF or whatever you want to open. It'll pop up. And then, have fun, because you're going to be reading for a very, very long time. So, again, we have Ambassadors Yovanovitch, Sondland, Volker, and Advisor McKinley has been released thus far. We continue to hear Rudy Giuliani's name coming across quite a bit. In Ambassador Volker's testimony, we hear the name John Solomon. John Solomon, you may be aware of this individual. He is a journalist and a reporter with The Hill. He is a frequent guest on Fox News, particularly with Sean Hannity. He has been pushing a very strong narrative that is in agreement with Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump and the administration. So, sort of to jump the gun here, with what I've read thus far in this testimony from Ambassador Volker, I'm starting to get the feeling that John Solomon, one of his sources, or his main source, is Rudy Giuliani, or somebody associated with Rudy Giuliani. They are such in lockstep with each other. It appears to me that Rudy Giuliani, or one of his associates, or somebody that Rudy Giuliani is feeding information to, is John Solomon's source. And you have to remember, folks, John Solomon and Sarah Carter's another one, and Sean Hannity, these three individuals primarily have been saying, oh, we got these sources, with a lot of damning evidence is going to be coming out against the Democrats, against these people, against those people. This goes all the way back to the Hillary Clinton investigation earlier this year that was still sort of unfolding in regards to some transcripts that came out, which we took the time here on the Kapital News to read. But again, it's this constant tease from Donald Trump, his administration. It's like he's on The Apprentice still. Stay tuned till next week. We're gonna have a real big one here for you next week. It's this constant drip. It's this constant, just hang on, it's coming. And then 3 years on, there's nothing. So you have this type of rhetoric, you have this type of teasing effect out there from John Solomon, Sarah Carter, Sean Hannity, and nothing ever drops. Nothing ever drops. Now, Adam Schiff, some of the Democrats are just as guilty as this on the other side, but I'm just telling you that it appears to me that Rudy Giuliani or one of his associates is John Solomon's source, okay? Now, you may disagree with me if you take the time to read the transcript, but just given what's sort of said here, I think there's lockstep here, just a little bit too much. Another thing we continue to see is Donald Trump, President Trump, continuing to attack the whistleblower or whistleblowers, because remember, we know we have one whistleblower. Do we have two? Because there was rumors previously that there might be a second whistleblower coming out, but we've never really heard anything since. Donald Trump continues to ask the question, where's the whistleblower? He asked this in public. He asks this and makes this charge during several recent rallies. He's tweeting this constantly. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter too much because of a lot of the information that has come out since is in agreement with what the whistleblower said. Now, despite Donald Trump saying that that's not true, that the whistleblower has made up lies and has made things up, that's not true. That's not true. Evidence, even the transcript itself that Donald Trump wants to continuously point to, and say there's nothing wrong with that phone call, that's exactly what the whistleblower stated. And they got that from secondhand sources, which again was pretty much verified by the intelligence community with the Inspector General. So if you think something's wrong here, there would have to be a huge, huge conspiracy against Donald Trump where the watchdog, the Inspector General, is in on the conspiracy. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, you're allowed to think what you want, but you're really going down there, and is that somewhere that you want to go to? So just be mindful of that, because what Donald Trump is attempting to do, he's trying to distract everybody from the information that's coming out. And he is a master at deception and distraction. It's what he does all the time. That's why he's questioning, where's the whistleblower? Where's the whistleblower? Where are they? It's never about the information. It's always about the whistleblower. That's why we have protections for whistleblowers, because they are the ones that get attacked. They are the ones who are threatened. They are the ones whose lives are turned upside down. This is why I told you guys at the outset. This is a major life decision, because if your name is outed, you're in a lot of trouble. Because the government's going to come after you. Donald Trump's clearly already going after the individual. We don't even know who he or she is. You can rest assured that a lot of his followers may very well go after this person. Other government agencies, depending on the information that is released, could go after this person. Legally, I mean, obviously. Sue this person, just bankrupt them in legal fees. This is what happens. Remember Edward Snowden a handful of years ago telling us about how Google and Facebook and everybody's spying on us and how they're giving all of that information through a back door to the U.S. government, so the NSA and FBI and CIA has it? Remember all that? People a lot of the government were not complaining that our constitutional rights were being taken from us and being violated on a daily basis. No. Pay no attention to the facts. Pay attention to the whistleblower. Who's this Edward Snowden character? Blah, 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 blah. Same thing here. Pay no attention to the phone call. Pay no attention to the evidence and the transcripts that are now coming out. Pay no attention to that. Where's the whistleblower? It's a distraction technique, okay? Now, I would like for the whistleblower to come out personally, despite what may happen to this individual. But, quite honestly, what this individual said, this whistleblower stated, is accurate. This is what we're seeing and we're seeing this by Yovanovitch, Sondland, Volker, and McKinley. And don't forget, Ambassador Sondland, ambassador to the European Union, is a political appointee, meaning he's a big Trump supporter. He gave a lot of money to Donald Trump, at least for his inaugural celebration. And that's par for the course. You give a lot of money to a candidate, they tend to reward those individuals with ambassadorships. That's par for the course. Varying degrees, obviously, depending on who the president might be and how they feel about that particular thing. But that's par for the course. So you don't have to raise your eyebrows to that too much. So just be mindful of that. Even Ambassador Sondland had to amend his testimony, because you are allowed to amend your testimony. You are given a little bit of a leeway there. He said, well, you know what? After reviewing the transcript, sitting down with my lawyer, we have to amend some things. And what did they amend? Well, we recalled that, you know what? There was a quid pro quo. There was a quid pro quo. Now, Donald Trump says there is no quid pro quo. But now even Donald Trump is saying, well, even if there was, so what? And you had Mick Mulvaney, acting chief of staff, a couple weeks ago come out and say, we do this all the time. And then, of course, he had to walk that statement back as well. Okay? So we went through all of this. We went through all of those documents. The whistleblower complaint, the memos from the IG, the transcript itself that was released by the White House, which is not a verbatim transcript. It is not word for word, which is even stated on that transcript. But nevertheless, that's what we're continuing to look at. And I stated at the beginning, and I still hold true to this, that transcript, that phone call between Trump and Zelensky, to me, did not rise to an impeachable offense. It did, however, in my opinion, and at the time, and I still believe it, did raise more questions than it did provide answers. And I said an investigation is warranted, because whether or not there was a quid pro quo, Donald Trump did. He did ask a foreign government to investigate a political opponent, Joe Biden, and even his son, Hunter Biden. And again, in the name of consistency, I stated here trying to defend Trump. I said, look, if he wants a leg to stand on, he better release another transcript with previous phone calls and conversations with the former administration from Ukraine saying, look, we've been doing this for years. I've been in here since 2017. I know that there's a narrative out there since 2016 that Ukraine has interfered in our elections, in my election. I don't like it. We have to work together to get to the bottom of this. And maybe somewhere in that previous conversation, which is made up, by the way, because this is speculation. I'm trying to give Donald Trump a leg to stand on here. Understand me. If he had had a previous conversation with the previous administration from Ukraine, and there was a corruption investigation going on, and maybe in that dragnet, Joe Biden and his son were brought up, and he's now just saying, hey, congratulations, Mr. Zelensky, for becoming the new president. Here's what we've been working on. We want you to continue with this. And guess what? Joe Biden and his son, this is what we were working on. We don't have that. All we know is it's 2019. We're in the midst of the 2020 presidential campaign. Joe Biden is a political rival. He is the front runner. And now, all of a sudden, President Trump is asking Ukraine to look in to 2016 interference and also to investigate a political rival. That's very suspicious. That's very suspect. And that in and of itself could rise to an impeachable offense, especially if there are other things that are tacked on to the charges that may lead to articles of impeachment. So that's why I said this needs to be investigated. And another thing that's sort of disconcerting, and this is sort of going against Dan Bongino, who I've given praise to in regards to the email mumbo jumbo with Hillary Clinton. He's now starting to show his cards too, who he's working for, and how much of a partisan he's playing up to be. Because you read his Twitter feed, and a lot of the things that he's saying is just read the transcript. We already have the transcript. All of this other stuff makes no difference. If this was Hillary Clinton, he'd be saying, where's all the other information? You think this only happened one time? You think he only had one phone call? You think he only talked to Rudy Giuliani about this once? You think he only talked about with Attorney General Bill Barr about this once? No, there'd be a whole host of other documents and facts that need to be found out. So he's showing his side, that he's now siloed in, and he's just on the right. He knows his base. He knows his audience. And like I've told you here a million times, if somebody's going to read a teleprompter and make big money, they're going to read whatever on there. They know who butters their bread. Dan Bongino knows who butters his bread, and that's it. I'm trying to find the truth. You want to lock up Joe Biden because he's guilty? Lock him up. You want to go after Obama? You find evidence he's guilty? Lock him up. You find Hillary Clinton evidence she's guilty? Lock her up. You find evidence that Donald Trump is guilty? Lock him up too. I'm about the truth and justice here. That's why I told you guys, a week or two ago, I think it was last week before I got sick, I said, hey, do me a favor. If you watch Fox News, turn on CNN. If you watch Fox News, turn on MSNBC. If you watch MSNBC or CNN, turn on Fox News. Did you do it? Did you do it? Were you honest with yourself? Did you give it a good try? Did you just watch those other networks all day? Did you scratch your head? You say, I've never heard that before. Do you think it's true? Or are you too siloed in to the right or to the left? That's what's wrong with this country. And nobody's helping it, including the President of the United States. So that's a shame. So a lot of things that are going on, a lot of what I just stated, I will continue to repeat on subsequent podcasts because it's a lot of information that's out there. There's a lot of process that is being misconstrued, and this is on purpose. This is on purpose because this is an attempt to confuse people. If you can't convince them, you confuse them. Divide and conquer, distract and deceive. That is exactly what's taking place here, and I'm sure it is on both sides. I know it's on both sides, but guess what? I said the Democrats have to reveal this information. They have to make this stuff public. And now you have the Republicans, rather, they were complaining, oh, this is taking place behind closed doors. Well, guess what? I can almost guarantee you that Ambassador Sondland updated and amended his transcript, or his testimony, rather, because he did not know what other witnesses were testifying to. And that's the exact reason why you do this in private. Because if everybody knows what everybody else is saying, then everybody else can have the same story. You follow? You can't do that. That's why I mean, look, this is like Investigation 101. All you have to do is watch like one episode of Law and Order, and you know if there's two people that are in the crime, you put one person in one room, you put the other person in the other room so they don't know what each other's saying. And then you try to catch them in a lie. Well, Sondland said, oh, damn. Somebody said something talking about me or something that I should have been aware of and said, oh, well, you know what, lawyer? Yeah, we're going to have to amend my transcript because I don't want to be prosecuted for perjury. So that's what he did. So for everybody out there who's blowing smoke saying this is ridiculous, this all has to take place in the light of day, no. There's a time and place for that. This is a grand jury, so to speak, investigation that's done in secret, that's done behind closed doors. And this is the exact reason why. So now we'll see what happens with other testimony that is released and other people who may still come before these various House Select Committees to testify behind closed doors before the next round of hearings are made public. And another thing, you're starting to see a switch in some of the polling where a lot of people were against impeachment, and now it's starting to tick up. So things are not looking too good for President Donald Trump right now. And I told you that from the outset, that this is not good for him. This is not good for him because, as I just stated a moment ago, for all we know, this is the first time he brought this investigation up, and it is a political rival. It is a political opponent, and it makes it look highly political. In his office, he should most definitely not be using his position to have another country look into a political opponent because it looks strictly about politics, not about policy. Okay? And that's serious business because you wouldn't like it if Obama did it or if Hillary Clinton did it. And in fact, a lot of people argue that that's exactly what Obama and Hillary Clinton did, that they used foreign intelligence or foreign sources to go after Donald Trump. So why is it okay for Donald Trump to ask, but not okay for the Obamas and Clintons and vice versa? Okay? I'm going after everybody. Get out of your silo for the sake of this country. All right, I'm going to read some of this transcript from Ambassador Volker. Recall, I believe he was the first witness to testify. His name was also mentioned in the whistleblower's complaint, and he resigned, I believe, that evening when that whistleblower's complaint became known. It was either that night or the next day. Ambassador Volker resigned. He does get to that in this transcript. What I'm going to read to you is sort of his opening statement. Some of the first pages are just the mumbo-jumbo. Everything's getting set up. A lot of the questions are actually being asked by staff members and the attorneys for these committees, not by the actual congressman. Again, this is the opening statement, so there's no questions being asked, but I thought some of this was interesting. I'm going to start somewhere in the early phases, but I'm not going to start from the beginning because a lot of it's just a bunch of blah, blah, blah. So allow me to begin. Again, this is Ambassador Volker. Second, in May of this year, I became concerned that a negative narrative about Ukraine, fueled by assertions made by Ukraine's departing prosecutor general, was reaching the President of the United States and impeding our ability to support the new Ukrainian government as robustly as I believe we should. After sharing my concerns with the Ukrainian leadership, an advisor to President Zelensky asked me to connect him to the president's personal lawyer, Mayor Rudy Giuliani. I did so. I did so solely because I understood that the new Ukrainian leadership wanted to convince those, like Mayor Giuliani, who believe such a negative narrative about Ukraine, that times have changed and that under President Zelensky, Ukraine is worthy of U.S. support. I also made clear to the Ukrainians on a number of occasions that Mayor Giuliani is a private citizen and the president's personal lawyer, and that he does not represent the United States government. That's a very important paragraph. Mayor Giuliani is a private citizen, the personal attorney for President Trump, and he is not speaking on behalf of the U.S. government. Very important to remember this. Third, at no time was I aware of or took part in an effort to urge Ukraine to investigate former Vice President Biden, as you will see from the extensive text messages I am providing, which convey a sense of real-time dialogue with several different actors. Vice President Biden was never a topic of discussion. Moreover, as I was aware of public accusations about the Vice President Biden, several times I cautioned the Ukrainians to distinguish between highlighting their own efforts to fight corruption domestically, including investigating Ukrainian individuals, something we support as a matter of policy here in the United States, in doing anything that could be seen as impacting U.S. elections, which is in neither the United States' nor Ukraine's own interests. So Ambassador Volker is telling the Ukrainians, look, when it comes to Vice President Biden, it's going to be in your best interest to investigate Ukrainian corruption, not looking into a political opponent, because it's not going to be good for you. Our policy is not going to be good for yours. Continuing, to the best of my knowledge, no such actions by Ukraine were ever taken, at least in part, I believe, because of the advice I gave them. So clearly the Ukrainians, at least at this time, agreed with the Ambassador Volker, yeah, you know what, we better stay out of U.S. politics, not look into Joe Biden, blah, blah, blah. Continuing, notably, I did not listen in on the July 25th, 2019 phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky. This is the phone call about the whistleblower and the kickstarted all this, okay? And received only superficial readouts about that conversation afterwards. In addition, I was not aware that Vice President Biden's name was mentioned or a request was made to investigate him until the transcript of this call was released on September 25th, 2019. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Ambassador Volker did not know on this phone call that Vice President Biden's name was ever mentioned and that an investigation into him and his son was mentioned, despite the fact in the previous statement, in the previous paragraph of this transcript, he states that he only received superficial readouts. So those readouts that he was given in regards to the phone call between Trump and Zelensky did not contain reference that that phone call had a conversation about investigating Joe Biden. So was that an omission on purpose by the White House or whoever gave those superficial readouts to other members of the Ukrainian envoy and anybody else within the White House or the State Department? That's an important question. So that's very interesting. He was given superficial readouts, but those readouts did not mention anything, and Volker only became aware of this when the rest of the country became aware of this on September 25th. So I'm going to sort of close it up there. We're going to get back to this because there's a lot of other names that are mentioned out there. Again, John Solomon, the journalist from The Hill, his name is called up in here. How everybody is connected and linked together. This is a spy novel in the making. And the other thing I want to stress, because we're going to continue to hear the conspiracy theory that's out there. And who knows, maybe it's true that, Joe Biden and his son did all this, that, and the other, or that there's some sort of deep state that's going after Donald Trump. Some of that is actually in this transcript with Volker in regards to Ambassador Yovanovitch. She was the Ukrainian ambassador who was removed by Donald Trump because, things are going to happen to her. She was the one that was referenced in the phone call with Zelensky. So, look, maybe there's a deep state thing. I'm growing more and more skeptical of it with some of the stuff that's starting to come out. It's still quite possible. And even if it is possible that there's some sort of conspiracy against Donald Trump, that does not exonerate Donald Trump. Both sides can be guilty, is what I'm telling you. And so don't get siloed in and say, well, just point your finger at the Democrats or just point your finger at Donald Trump and the Republicans. No, both sides can be equally guilty. So keep that in the back of your mind. We're interested in the truth here. If you watch Fox News, do me a favor, watch CNN. If you watch MSNBC, watch Fox News, do me a favor. You're doing yourself a favor too. Get out of your silo because it's not good for the country at all. At all. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Kreitis. Godspeed.